Welcome back into the mental game, where this week's guest is Cincinnati head coach Wes Miller.
When you're not seeing those results, it's extremely challenging. It was a dark year in a lot of ways.
And in this episode, Coach Miller opens up about his basketball career, going back to his playing days at North Carolina that has now led him into coaching, where he's the head coach at the University of Cincinnati, now leading the Bearcats into the Big 12. We talk about basketball, mental health, both of them together as he tries to help his players both on and off the court. All of that and much, much more in this episode. But once again, if you're loving the mental game, please like, subscribe, rate, review, tell your family, tell your friends, as we try to help as many people as possible with their mental health. But without further ado, it is now time for the latest edition of the mental game with Wes Miller. Welcome back into the mental game. As you can see, I have a very special guest here, University of Cincinnati men's basketball coach Wes Miller. Coach Wes, appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. We're here at the home court of the Bearcats. You got your new Jordan branded shirt on. We'll get into all that here in just a sec. But first thing I ask everyone on the mental game is, what does mental health mean to them? And people answer it in a variety of ways, whether it's something they were conscious of at an early age, or maybe there was something traumatic that happened to them that triggered them to be more cautious of it, or they work in a hard profession like coaching where you always have to be on your game. But I'll ask you the same thing. What does mental health mean to you?
Yeah, it's probably something that's evolved over time. But as a coach, when you work with young people every day, and especially as a head coach where you oversee a staff, and you see the things people go through, and you see how much more effective people are when they are in a good frame of mind, in a good mind space. It's evolved over time to something that I'm much more passionate about and cognizant of, even personally. Like I'm a better coach when I'm in a good mental space, when I'm in a healthy mental space. It's like the term physical health. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of applications. I'm sure that's why you get a variety of answers.
Yeah.
It's something you have to work at every day. It's something you have to be aware of. I think in a leadership role, we have to make sure that the things that we're demanding of our student athletes, of our staff, that they're not creating problems that will create mental health issues. We're actually creating a healthy environment mentally. I think we have to have resources for when there are those inevitable issues that will happen in a high-pressured environment that we're in. I'm proud at Cincinnati, we have those resources in our department, and we're continuing to reinvest and double down in those resources. So I could kind of keep going into it, but it's like the same way you ask about, do you care about your physical development as a player? What does that mean? Well, shoot, there's a lot of things that go into that, how you train, how you eat. It's the same thing mentally. So we do look at it holistically. We try to make sure we have the right environment, and we try to make sure we have the resources for when those inevitable issues pop up.
Yeah, I mean, mental health, especially in sports, is more important now than ever. Let's get into your background. I mean, you're a basketball guy through and through, growing up in the Carolinas and dreaming, I'm sure, of what you did and playing at UNC. But where did that love for basketball originate?
I was really fortunate as a kid. I was exposed to it.
Yeah.
My father and my parents grew up taking me to ACC basketball games, and at that time, back in the 80s and 90s, ACC basketball in the state of North Carolina,
crazy,
was a big deal. There weren't the professional football. There weren't a lot of the things that go on there now.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the professional sports of that region, was ACC basketball. And so I actually grew up a Wake Forest fan because my dad was a Wake Forest graduate. So from the time I can remember, I was going to Wake Forest basketball games and going to the ACC tournament. And I fell in love with college basketball following ACC basketball in that region, in that time frame. And then it really kind of evolved from there.
When you decided that you wanted to play basketball, obviously you're playing throughout high school, you get to college. And getting the chance to play at a place like UNC, what was that? I know you grew up a Wake Forest fan. Well, it had to be a dream come true to play for a coach like Roy Williams and get a play at the Smith Center and like just do everything that you watched growing up. These guys that I'm sure you idolized playing in the ACC.
Yeah, I was a basketball junkie. Again, from the time I can walk, probably, and it really evolved over time. I think by the time I was in high school, I was a huge NBA fan. I mean, like everybody in my generation, I was the biggest Michael Jordan and Bulls fan, and I was a fan of all of college basketball. And again, really fortunate. My parents would take me to the NCAA tournament and things of that nature. So I got exposed as I got older, even though it started, probably locally as a kid. But yeah, I think I always dreamed about playing on, the biggest stage. Certainly, like all kids playing in the NBA, but certainly playing college basketball on the biggest stage, and to play at North Carolina, what was a dream come true in a lot of ways. Even though as a young kid I was pulling against them, because of my dad. My dad being an alumnus to Wake Forest.
When you get to UNC, obviously they're coming out of the Jordan era and winning championships, and just it's one of the top 5 programs in college basketball history. To get to wear that jersey and play, you played 3 years there?
Played 4 years.
So 4 years there.
Transferred in. I was a freshman at James Madison as a scholarship player.
Yeah.
Transferred after my freshman year, and ended up at Carolina, where I was on the team but had to sit out of the games. That was the old transfer rules.
Right.
So I had to sit out the games for a year, but I was there playing for Coach Williams for 4 seasons.
And him obviously being the great coach that he is, I think that probably sparked your interest in coaching, maybe learning under him, playing for him.
Yeah, as you mentioned, certainly playing it's like playing at Cincinnati, right?
Yeah.
You're playing at one of the great programs in the history of our game, which was undescribable in a lot of ways for somebody that grew up idolizing college basketball. And then more importantly, playing for a guy like Roy Williams. I knew I wanted to coach at a really young age.
Okay.
I'm not sure I understood what that meant at the time, but always knew I wanted to play. I still miss playing. I loved playing basketball.
Well, I've seen you at the kids' camps putting up some shots.
Yeah.
So that's what
I'm good with 10-year-olds, but I knew that I wanted to coach. I've always had a crazy passion for our game, and one of the main reasons that I transferred to Carolina was to be around one of the greatest coaches to ever coach our game.
Mm-hmm.
And I could do a whole podcast on being around Roy Williams and what I've learned playing from him.
Yeah.
Having a strong relationship with him since I played there. But that was a blessing as I got into coaching, for sure.
It's interesting to me how you talk about you knew at such an early age. When do you think you knew you wanted to be a coach?
I think if you asked me at 8 years old,
really,
like, what do you know, like the old question of what do you want to do, and most kids would say, I want to be an astronaut or something. I wanted to be an NBA basketball player, and when I was done playing, I wanted to coach. I mean, I thought I had my life figured out.
Yeah.
Now, again, I don't know if I understood what coaching was till I got into coaching for a couple years, but I think from a young age, that was my dream, was to play the game and then coach the game.
Yeah, and to have that mindset of wanting to go learn under Coach Williams. I mean, that takes a lot of smarts. It takes a lot of knowledge, a lot of ambition to know. Obviously, you want to live the dream of playing at Carolina, but learning under a guy like him and just being able to, at an early age, see what success is like at that level, that had to set you up for your career of just setting the standard of how you should coach, right?
Yeah, it sounds great now. I mean, at the time, I wanted to play. And I was concerned going there without a scholarship after being a Division I scholarship player. I was concerned that playing was on the top of my brain in those days. Right. They had Raymond Felton at the time at my position, who ended up being the 5th pick in the NBA draft in 2005. It was going to be difficult. To play at Carolina for somebody like me. So it wasn't that easy of a decision, although it may sound that way now. I remember sitting in Coach Williams' office when I was going through the transfer process, and he looked at me and looked at my father and said, "What do you want to do when you're done?" And I said, "I want to coach." And he said, "Well, you have to come here." And that was his big recruiting pitch, that it wasn't just a 4-year decision. It was a decision that would impact the rest of my life. And I didn't come to it right away. But with some help from my father, I kind of saw the light. And again, it was one of those things that I don't know if I understood it all at the time, but it's a decision that changed my life in a lot of ways.
In college, when you're wanting to play, chomping at the bit to get on the court at a blue blood program and you're not, how does that affect your mental health? Did you go through some darker days or depression, or just put your head down, keep working? No,
it was, on a personal level, it was very difficult. And I always felt like I had perspective. Again, been really fortunate to have great parents, great coaches in my life around me. But when I wasn't playing, I think I redshirted my first year there. My second year, 04-05, I tell this to every team that I coach. We won the national championship at the end of that year, which was another event that changed my life. And I was a part of that, and it's impacted me ever since. But it was a very difficult year, maybe by far the most difficult year of my college career till the end. Right? Because I wasn't playing, and I desperately wanted to play, and I, like a lot of student athletes, was putting everything I thought I could put into trying to be the best player I could and earn playing time. And when you're not seeing those results, it's extremely challenging. It was a dark year in a lot of ways. But fast forward to the national championship where you are part of something that's just so much bigger than you. Those are aha moments where you go, okay, it was worth it. Or the following year when I was fortunate to start on a top 10 team. Those things never happen personally if I didn't go through those difficult times and figure out how to work through them. So I value those difficult times, but that was, ironically, even though the ending is one of those great moments, that was one of the most difficult moments in my playing career for sure.
Working through those moments as how old were you, 19, 20 years old? Working through those moments, what did you learn about yourself, and what were some of those things that helped you get through the dark days? Because a lot of kids could be like, all right, especially with the way it is now, just transfer, get the hell out of town. But to put your head down, work through it, but also make sure that you're emotionally, mentally good. What did you do to kind of help your mental health through that time?
Yeah, well, it's one of the great things about college athletics or high-level athletics is it teaches you lessons that'll help you for the rest of your life. Again, this is years and years ago now, but first, I was really fortunate to have people around me that supported me. I mean, I remember our strength coach, Jonas Saratian. I was so mad every time I didn't play. And I was conscious not to make that a problem within the locker room. But I was so frustrated if I didn't play or I got a chance to play and didn't play well. He noticed that and knew I was struggling, and we'd go lift after the game. And, I'd take out that frustration off of working and trying to do something to get better and improve. I had people that knew how bad I wanted it and would help pull me back into the gym and continue to work. And so one of the lessons, it sounds very simple, but one of the lessons that I take now that I learned then is, it doesn't always happen when you want. It doesn't always feel good when it doesn't happen, but you just kind of keep going. You keep showing up. You keep working. Whatever your cliche terminology is, you keep pounding that rock till it eventually breaks. That's one of those very simple but important life lessons that as I've gotten into coaching or gotten into my adult life, I can draw on that I learned as a student athlete.
You mentioned the dream of playing in the NBA, getting there, coaching afterwards. The coaching journey happened a little sooner probably than you anticipated, but walk me through 28 years old. You're already on the staff at UNC Greensboro as an assistant, but getting the opportunity to be the head coach of a college basketball program at 28, I can't even, I'm 29 now, about to be 30. I can't imagine doing that 2 years ago. What was that moment like for you getting that job?
I was just really fortunate. At the time it was difficult. We started the year poorly. I was an assistant coach at UNCG working for a great coach in Mike Dement. And we had it's a long story. We had an incredibly difficult non-conference schedule. So if anybody ever wants to Google that and look at our
you want to book that here for Cincinnati?
Oh man, it was incredibly difficult, and there's a long history of why that was the case. But we'd played 7 or 8 BCS games. to start the year, and at a mid-major program that was trying to build at that time, that was just incredibly challenging. So we started the year poorly, and the administration made a change, and they kind of let me be the interim coach at 28 years old to finish the year.
Yeah.
And we didn't do great finishing that non-conference slate. But once we got into league, we won a couple games, and we ended up winning 10 of 11.
Oh, wow.
Kind of caught lightning in a bottle.
Yeah.
And, won the North Division of the Southern Conference at that time. And I found myself as a head coach and the youngest Division I head coach in the country. So another example, sometimes the most difficult times lead to some of the great times, right?
Sure.
That we don't always understand it when we're going through it. But we were really struggling there. I got an opportunity. I had a bunch of kids that made the most of that, and we won a bunch of 1 or 2 possession games. I say now, at the time, I probably felt like I knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
We got really lucky and won a bunch of games. I was really fortunate to be a Division I head coach at a really young age.
You spent 10 years at UNC Greensboro, the ups and downs of being a young coach, figuring yourself out, figuring out how to lead a young group of men. What was that process like? Because you just said it. You thought you knew everything then or knew what was best, but you're 28, 29 in your first head coaching job. Walk me through that journey, because it had to be kind of crazy, surreal, but also obviously inspiring to yourself to be able to have that job title, but also learning how to manage a team, manage a season. You've watched it through great coaches like Coach Williams, the coach you had there at UNC Greensboro that you were an assistant for, but it had to be a learning process along the way.
Well, it's still a learning process. Let's hope that never stops, right?
Right.
I think, again, I found myself in this interim role at a very young age, and we kind of caught lightning in a bottle and made a run and had some success. And what I found when I got the job full time is that, figuring out how to make a run, even though that has value. We did some great things. That team will always be in a special place in my heart. That's something, but building something that's sustainable year after year, that's something very, very different. And, again, managing a team for the second half of a season is something, but running a program is something very different. And that was humbling, my first 2 or 3 years as a head coach. Probably thought I had it figured out, looking back on it in some ways. And you realize really quickly that you don't. And I think the biggest difference between myself as a leader now and then is I know now that I don't have it figured out, but I'm just working to try to figure it out every day.
Yeah.
You're always evolving. We're always becoming. We're always trying to learn and grow. And I think once I learned and accepted that, I became a much more humble leader. And we've been able to solve problems and continue to grow and build on our identity. But those first 2 or 3 years were very difficult.
And throughout then, obviously, you guys won a lot of games at UNCG, and you had success where that gets your name thrown in to different jobs, and you get into the spotlight in the coaching search world. A place like Cincinnati gives you a ring 3 years ago now. What do you remember about
two and some change?
Two and some change. What do you remember about getting the call from UC?
It's really interesting. As we started to have, I think we had 5 straight, 25-plus win seasons. Went to 5 straight postseasons. What it would have been if it wasn't for the
COVID,
the COVID year, right, where we were in the NIT or NCAA tournament, which and that was unprecedented at UNCG, and that was a special thing coming from that level in that league.
Right.
But as we're going through that, you do get phone calls. And jobs do come up. I never once woke up at UNCG and thought about another job. To me, we were going to win a national championship there. That was the idea, to keep building and keep growing. And I had great leadership there, athletic director, 2 different chancellors that were really supportive. But always in the back of your mind, you go, hey, if I am going to leave, I'm leave something really good. I had something really good. I'm going to leave for something that's truly unique and special. And there's only a handful of programs in college basketball that I feel that way about.
Right.
When Cincinnati called, that was one of them. And you just think about the history and tradition here. And I was so aware of the history and tradition over the last 30 years in my lifetime, because I grew up watching Coach Huggins' teams here.
Yep.
I was playing and coaching, during Coach Cronin's teams, and really had a high level of respect for them. So I had an idea of what Cincinnati basketball's been about for 30 years. What as you look into it's even more amazing is how this program's been for 70 years.
Right.
When you go back to national championships in the 60s and Oscar Robertson and there's so much to get into. This is one of the great programs in the history of our game, and so this was one of those phone calls that makes you it gives you that knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah.
And makes you want to learn more, and was one of the only places that I ever got a call from that I was really excited about and considered leaving UNCG for.
Well, being a Cincinnati guy myself, obviously rocking the old UC stuff, I was so hyped that we got a head coach that's passionate about basketball, passionate about the history here in Cincinnati, because I grew up in the Coach Huggins era. I mentioned one of your former assistants, DeMar Johnson. I'm pretty good friends with him. But just like watching Melvin Levitt, Kenyon Martin, those guys, the Jordan Brand jerseys, and just the games on national TV every week, it was crazy watching that era of Cincinnati basketball. And so I imagine you having the sense watching and then playing against those teams of what they were, like you were just ready to chomping at the bit to get into this role.
Yeah, and I honestly, that I'd never been in the city of Cincinnati. I didn't know a lot about the University of Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. By the way, but both have blown me away. The community here, this town. I don't call it a town. I mean, a city. This is a big town.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that.
But this university, it's amazing some of the things that we're doing here. I didn't know any of that, but I knew what Cincinnati basketball meant in between those lines down there.
Yeah.
And I felt like the basic values of what this program has been about, I resonate with those. Mm-hmm. Our teams over the years have resonated with those similar values, so I felt like there was a real fit there. But make no mistake about it. I mean, when you grow up watching something, we talked about my childhood. I mean, I always say this publicly. People probably get tired of hearing it, but in those days, I mean, the East Bay magazine was where you got all the cool gear.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm still guilty of liking shoes and maybe gear a little too much. But I ordered like 2 or 3 shorts out of the East Bay magazine that were like the most prized possessions of my childhood, and one of them were Cincinnati Bearcats Jordan shorts. So going back to Jordan, that was a really neat deal for me. It's listen, this has been a cool, relevant program. It's been a culturally relevant program in my lifetime. We want to get back to being culturally relevant. Certainly what's most important is that you play the right way on the court, that you play with great effort, you play with great pride, that nothing else matters more than that. But so we got to do that first, but some of these other things like getting back to the right alignment with Jordan Brand and other things, we got to get back to being culturally relevant nationally, and I think people here at Cincinnati understand that.
No doubt about it. And Coach Huggins and those teams in the late 90s, early 2000s, rocking the Jordan Brand logo on the Cincinnati jersey. I collect those jerseys, so I have 4 or 5 of them hanging up in my living room, and I know fans are so hyped to be back with Jordan. So I'm going to get into that now because you just brought it up. What was that process like? Because UC, I think, you mentioned like the cultural, I don't know, maybe movement takeover, that Jordan just brings a different spark to Cincinnati basketball, because I think there's so much winning and grit and tradition surrounding that this program during that time period. Was that such a big priority for you, even having that background of buying Jordan shorts in the East Bay magazine?
Yeah, when I think about Cincinnati basketball, I think about a certain edge, right? A certain toughness, a chip on your shoulder, and that's not just those teams in the 90s and early 2000s. I thought Coach Cronin's teams exemplified that, right? When I think about Cincinnati basketball, those are the things that pop up, and as you live in this community, you see why it represents this city so well.
Yeah.
When I think about Jordan Brand, the first thing I think about is Michael Jordan, and is that in my eyes, the greatest competitor in my lifetime in any sport, in any arena.
Yep.
And so there's just some really natural alignment there, and it was so neat that that's we're an original Jordan Brand school when they started working with college basketball.
Yep.
That it wasn't just the alignment with the colorway, which is also another cool thing. There's real natural alignment with that competitive edge. Again, one of the reasons I came here is because I felt alignment with that personally, and as a coach, and the teams that I coached resonated with some of the same things. So I think the neat thing is not just that Jordan's cool and we're wearing Jordan. There's real relevance and alignment on a fundamental level, and that excites me more than just wearing a cool pair of gear.
Well, certainly that going to the Big 12, having Jordan Brand back on board is going to help recruiting and going to help you build this program like you've been doing these last couple of years. But walk me through those first 2 seasons here in Cincinnati. Obviously, like any coaching change, you're going to have some ups and downs along the way, whether it's transfer portal or getting your roster together, recruiting. What did you learn about yourself those first 2 years here in Cincinnati?
How much time you got?
I got about 70 more minutes on the memory card. So,
no, I think I just one of the things we're always preaching to our players is every day is about growth. Like every day is about improving. Every day is about learning. So we got to practice what we preach as coaches, as teachers. I'm learning every day, and certainly when you step into a new role at a new place at a new level, man, you're
different.
Yeah, you get out of your comfort zone a little bit. I mean, I spent the majority of my life in North Carolina, moving to a new area. Like in so many ways, taking this job. There's 3 players on the roster when I get here.
Yeah.
You're coming in on the heels of some controversy. Like the program wasn't in a great spot the day we walk in the door. In so many ways, like this was stepping way out of my comfort zone.
Right.
We had built something that was really sustainable at Greensboro. So I left something really sustainable that in some ways was very comfortable to something that we needed to get back to the right place and was truly uncomfortable in an uncomfortable area. You grow. Yeah. You're going to grow. You're forced to grow.
You have to,
and isn't that what it's all about,
right?
And so, I've grown in so many ways. Being in the American the last 2 years, coaching against Kelvin Sampson 3 times a year. We faced them 3 times the last 2 years, and they've been one of the top 2 or 3 teams in America. And going down the list, the great coaches in that league, trying to take a new roster that was formed, it felt like overnight, and figure out how to manage that roster and figure out the right style of play without losing our identity. Like we've grown a lot of ways there. Learning how to manage a much bigger staff. Learning how to lead when you're leading a much bigger program with a lot more eyes. I mean, I could just kind of keep going on and on and on, and we could get into each aspect of it. But I'm growing here every day, and I'm hopefully not just me. We are embracing that process, and we'll keep getting better for it.
I've been around the UC program for a long time and seen coaches come through and talk to different assistants, players, and I've got a really good sense from them that are here now that you care a lot about your players, make time for a lot of one-on-one time. And I think in the mental health side of thing, in the day and age we live in where players have everything on their phone, they're getting mean tweets or people yelling stuff at them in the stands, or they're thinking about transferring with how easy it is to transfer, which can be good and bad depending on how you look at it. Why did you make it, or have you made it such a big priority to focus on each individual player and their mental health and how they feel each and every day here in the gym?
I'm passionate about basketball. I just love the game, always have.
Yeah.
I love the high stakes and the competitive spirit. That keeps me alive every day.
Yeah.
But the thing that I've found the longer that I coach that makes my life feel meaningful is working with young people. And it sounds a little corny or cliche, but we all get to that point in life where you go, hey, does what I do matter? And working with young people is the thing that feels good all the time. I love being around. They make me feel young. We have terrific young people in our program right now. The age that we work with them is just so unique. They come in, and like our freshmen right now, Jizzle James and Rayvon Griffith, like they're still kids.
Yeah,
and they'd hate it if they listen to this for me to say that, but they're still kids.
Yeah.
And then you look at them 2 years later, and they start to become young men, and we get that process over and over again as coaches. Like, that is so neat. So it is one of the most passionate things in my life, is working with them day to day. But to get back to your question, you know, like they're meant the pressures that they have on them now as college basketball players at a place like this is just so much different than what I had as playing at North Carolina because of the phones.
Right, yeah, it changes everything.
I can't imagine, you know, I mean, it's human nature to want to hear what people say about you. I mean, we were all like that, right? I'm 40 years old, and it's easy for me to not check social media during the season.
Yeah.
But it you know, at 19 or 20,
no,
if I could search my name on Twitter, I can't imagine not doing it.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you're in a place like this where there's eyes on you, there's going to be all kinds of different views and opinions. That's truly difficult. And then the cameras and the things they deal with that sometimes we don't give them credit for. They're more mature than we are, or than we were at that age. They're actually more emotionally prepared. They're more socially aware than we were at that age. And so it's really important that we put into perspective what they're dealing with, and we make sure that we're sensitive to it.
Yeah. Do you keep in mind just everything you just mentioned, the phones, the pressures, the things that, you know, I'm 30, but I didn't have, I think, like, Twitter came out when I was in high school, and I obviously wasn't like a high-performing athlete, so I didn't have the people saying mean stuff at me. I guess when I was a sports reporter, I would get emails and things like that, and tweets. But how do you make sure that, like, do you preach that to them throughout the off season or what kind of do you guys do to help them with their mental health and keep things in perspective that get them engaged mentally and make sure that they don't go to a dark spot when they get a mean tweet or when they get benched or they're not getting the playing time like you were talking about earlier in your career? What kind of steps do you guys have in place to make sure they're okay in those moments?
A lot of steps,
and
it's not just one area. You know, the first thing for me, it always starts with real relationships, right? So myself, our staff, we're going to be highly invested in building real, genuine relationships with our players. Yeah. And when you have that real relationship and those real touches and interactions every day, those are all chances to teach and coach. And so I give our staff a ton of credit. We are spending real time with our guys every day. And, you know, that's an opportunity to coach everything in life, but certainly an opportunity to touch on their mental health or how they deal with the stresses and pressures of playing at UC, whether it's social media or otherwise. We bring in, you know, people to do media training and kind of put that in perspective, right? We give perspective when we stand in front of the team. And I say to my team every year, I know they'll never listen to this, but that when we start playing games, I will not check Twitter till the end of the season. And I explain why. You know, I explain why I do that, because we do have control of what we allow into our brains.
Yeah.
Now, do I think that they're ever going to listen to that and do that? No, but it gives perspective on why they shouldn't always listen to everything that they read or somebody types behind a screen. So there's a lot of other things we do, but we do try to hit it every way that we can, just to create perspective and to acknowledge what's going on around them.
Joe Burrow deletes his Twitter during the season too, so you're in good company with that.
If I keep getting mentioned in the same breath as Joe Burrow in any way, that's a good thing. So.
Well, he's got some style points with him too. So I mean, that's two areas I think you're rolling there. 2 questions left for you. Just the goal here at Cincinnati with you now going into year 3 and beyond. Walk me through what the goals are for you personally and this team as you enter a new era with the Bearcats in the Big 12 now.
Yeah, you know, the goal is to keep growing every day. This is a program that belongs on the national stage, that's competing for conference championships, that's competing for NCAA tournament championships. Every day it's about taking a step in that direction.
Yeah.
So that's the goal, is today to take another step to improve, and then wake up tomorrow and take another step to improve and to get this program back on the national map. This team has that opportunity. We're not going to get obsessed every single second with where we are. We're going to get obsessed with what we're doing to get there. So that's the goal for our program, is to take more steps daily so we can get back in back to where this program belongs.
Last thing I'll ask you, and it's what I end every podcast episode with, advice to a young, hungry assistant coach, someone that wants to be in your shoes, follow your footsteps one day.
Yeah, it'd be the same advice I'd give to our players. Number one, I'd consume myself with what I'm doing to get better myself.
Yeah.
Right? What are you doing every day to improve? We one thing we say is we work.
Yeah.
And it sounds cliche, but we work. Like, are you working, at a level to ascend in our profession, which is a very demanding profession. The second thing is be a master in your role.
Yeah.
Right. I say this to our staff all the time that, you can't always say, well, when I get to that next role, I'm going to be great. You need to be great in the role that you're in before you get to that next role. So those are the two things. The third thing, I'd say stick with it.
Yeah.
Like I could give, we got a little bit into some of my background, but some of the lowest times that I had as a player were the reason, and what happened during those times were the reason that I found some of the greatest times that I had as a player. Some of the lowest moments I've had as a coach, cultivated change or made me dig in and find something different that I didn't know was there that led to some of the greatest moments I've had as a coach. So sometimes don't get discouraged. Stay at it and keep trying to figure out what you have to do to grow and evolve.
Well, Wes, I can't thank you enough. I can tell you're passionate, obviously, about basketball coaching and the Cincinnati program. They're in good hands. So, Wes, thank you so much, man.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
For sure, and we'll see everybody back here next week on The Mental Game. And that was an amazing conversation with Coach Miller. I can't thank him enough for coming on The Mental Game and really opening up about his basketball career and mental health as the Bearcats get ready to kick off their first season here in the Big 12. It'll be exciting here in Cincinnati and for UC fans like myself. Next week, another exciting and surprise guest right back here on The Mental Game. I'll give you two hints. One, they are from West Virginia, and two, they are a country music artist. Those are your two hints, and we'll see everybody back here next week on The Mental Game.